Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi everyone, I'm Shane Borza, and if you're watching this show on YouTube, you'll see there's a little glitch, so I'm just re-recording the intro saying that it's me and that this is Film Notes, so thanks for watching. And I have a new connection here. I'm always excited when I have a new guest that I don't know. So this is Noel Stark, and she is an author, and we're going to talk about her book, which is centered in the industry, but she still works in the industry. So we're going to talk a little bit about those two different things. But the book is Love, Camera, Action, and it's her debut novel. So I'm really excited to hear how you went from, or perhaps were inspired by, the production you do to get into the writing. But regardless, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Now, I read your bio a little bit because I didn't want to come in like super cold. So originally you're from Canada, but you do live in LA now. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, talk to me a little bit about, before we get into the book, because that was something I asked you before we started rolling here a minute ago. So you're working in film and TV. Is that something you started in Canada, or was it once you moved here that you got into, like, what's kind of the history of your like backstory in the industry?
Yeah. I started, okay. I don't have a ready answer for that, so I have to think about it. I started off as an actress. I went to New York to study at the Neighborhood Playhouse, and then I went back to Canada to continue acting. And my acting career kind of got me into film, which is another story. It kind of led me to shoot a short film that went to Sundance and TIFF. And so that launched me into a behind the scenes kind of career. And so I started working in Canada. But in Canada, because the industry is so much smaller than it is in LA, you have to know how to do a lot of different things. So I was working in scripted, I was working in film, I was working in TV, I was working a lot in reality TV and in documentary, and in very various roles: writer, director, actor, singer, PA, casting, locations assistant, which is the worst job. That is probably the worst job. And so as a result, I got a really well-rounded understanding of the industry from a number of different angles. And then I moved down to LA just because I wanted to expand my horizons in terms of what kind of work I could do. And so that's what's brought me here.
I was laughing a little bit about, because I've never done any locations work, but I've heard from a couple of people that it's just so difficult. So I was laughing a little bit about that. So a little bit of a parallel. So I'm American, but I went to film school and lived in Sydney, Australia for 3 years. And that's where I got started. And similarly, because it's a much smaller industry, even though Sydney's kind of like the hub or like film capital of that country, it's so much smaller than here. And so a lot of people there, you meet them on set doing like role A, and they're like, oh, I never do this. I'm usually doing like B, C, D through Z or whatever. So it is a lot of hats. And it gets you a chance to not only learn a lot about a lot, but to learn like how those jobs work together and to be super flexible so you can show up and do whatever's needed on whatever the gig is.
Yeah. And it also allows you to be a little bit more empathetic to other roles, because there's a lot of gossiping and complaining in the film and TV industry. So when you do all those various roles, you're just a bit more empathetic, where you're saying, oh my gosh, well, it must have been hard because of this, or like this job is difficult because of this reason. And so when you do a bunch of different things, and also it makes your job, the job that you're working on, better, because you can understand the different things and bring those skills in to whatever job you're working on. I really loved having that background of having so many jobs.
I wanted to ask, because you mentioned, and then you moved to LA to kind of expand your horizon. So like, what's the timeline here? Like, how long were you in New York? How long were you in Canada? Hey, how long have you been here? Was those kind of like short hops? Were you like in New York for years? Like what kind of timeline are we talking about with this background?
Yeah, I mean, because there's immigration restrictions. I was in New York for 3 years, and then I went back to Toronto, I guess, for 15. But I was also working in the States because I had my green card. Or I have my green card. And so I worked in Atlanta for a bit. Like the book is set in Atlanta. And then I went back to Toronto, and I've done gigs in Vancouver and Montreal. And then I came down to LA, and I've been here for 7 years. So that's the timeline, basically.
As I was laughing similarly. So I was in Australia 3 years, 2010 to 12. And yeah, similar thing, because is there like education visa for the program, and you get a couple months before and after, and then that's it. You either gotta get a job or you gotta leave, so
marry somebody or you're out.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, because one thing that I found is, especially when people start, they have an idea. It's kind of like going to college. You're like, I'm going to go, you're in high school and you go, when I go to college, I'm going to get this degree. And then a lot of times you switch majors, you get into something and then you see like, oh, I don't like this. Or you've tried a bunch of things. You kind of come out 4 years later with whatever you were into. And similarly, a lot of people are starting, or especially in film school, everyone wants to direct. And the good, bad thing about film schools, most of the practical ones, is they force you to do all the roles.
Right.
And a lot of people graduate with like an interest in a role that they never thought of initially, or the thing they thought they were going to love, they don't actually like. So after a couple of years, there's more of like your A, B, C level things. Like I primarily do these. I'll do these and these, like if I have to, So where have you found yourself like over the years with all these different experiences and different hats? Like, have you settled on primary kind of secondary roles, or are you still finding you're kind of like, hey, I'm open for whatever?
Like I like saying that I'm open for whatever, but I find that I put myself more in the writing and the producing roles. And in reality TV, the writing role is putting together footage, like you're writing with the footage. So it's almost like, you're called a story producer or a co-executive producer to do that. You're harnessing footage rather than harnessing words. And so writing happens in a lot of different ways. I mean, I've worked in development. I don't love working in development because it's kind of heartbreaking to me, because you put so much energy into these projects and they often don't go anywhere, because that's just what development is. And it's just so sad to see them not realized. But I think what I've become is more on the writer's side, but with a secondary as a producer, because I really like to see what I've written realized. And in order to do that, you have to have some producer chops.
Now, we talked in the introduction about your debut novel. So wanted to ask, like, is this something you've always wanted to do? Is that something that happened like as you were doing all this stuff of like, oh my God, like there's so many stories behind the scenes, like somebody should tell these? Like, how did it turn into like writing a novel and like releasing it? Especially because it's set in the production world.
Yeah, I never ever thought I was going to write a novel, ever, because I put authors on a pedestal. I knew it took an enormous amount of work and you had to be very, very talented. But I went through this huge phase of reading romance novels, and I just kind of fell in love with the form. Like in terms of film, everybody loves romantic comedies. I don't care who you are. You can deny it all you want, but everybody loves romantic comedies. And I did too. And I just kind of got the bug to write a novel because I think I had been making my own films, making my own TV shows, working in the business for so long. And it was so overwhelming getting my own projects off the ground. It takes so much effort. You have to find people with money. You have to find people with time. You have to gather a huge crew around you to get anything made. And I was just kind of tired by that time, but I still wanted to create. So I got this idea to write this book about a director and a director of photography, which I'm sure you know is a very charged relationship. And it just kind of went on from there. I was writing in between gigs. I I was stealing time to write. So I was still working in TV when I was writing this novel, but it was very much a side project that bloomed into something that actually was able to be published, which I'm pretty grateful for. But yeah, I think one of the reasons why I chose setting it on a film set is because it was a new form that I wasn't used to working in. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time world building. I wanted to be in a world that I understood very well because I wanted to focus on the characters. I wanted to focus on the relationships. And film just seemed like a natural place for me. And I had seen so many Hollywood romances that generally focused on the actors and sometimes the writers. Sometimes writers will get in there, but never on the crew. So I thought it was kind of an unexplored set, if you will, to see a love story. And that's why I chose it.
Well, I think it works for a number of reasons. Like, first of all, like, it's great to write what you know, but most people in the world, I mean, now it's much more open. Like, you can go to YouTube and put BTS name of anything and like see stuff.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, it was like you had to buy the double disc director's DVD and sit there and be like, I'm going to watch the 2-hour movie and then going to watch the movie again with commentary 1, and then going to watch it again with commentary. Well, you spent the whole day. Yeah. But you got to see those featurettes and those behind the scenes, and that's how you learned how they did things. I mean, the 80s and 90s was really hard. You had to really seek stuff out or subscribe to like a Movie Maker magazine or something. So those worlds, I think, are still new and different for people, and like exotic.
And even though I watched all those behind the scenes DVDs and I really missed that, but even those were curated. They were heavily curated and they were very much from particular perspectives. So it might be the director commentary, or it's, behind the scenes and it'll be on a specific day that everybody knows they'll be on their best behavior, or it's like the biggest explosions. Whereas it's really hard to know what the environment of a set is like unless you actually are on it. Because as you know, it's hurry up and wait. It's so boring at times. And then it's charged full of like intense movement. And there's so many moving parts. I remember seeing Guillermo del Toro speak. And he said that directing is like playing a game of Tetris while you're running from a train. And it's so true, because you are trying to do all these tiny things to make the bigger thing possible on a crazy timeline, on a crazy budget, with 1,000 voices yelling at you. And it makes for a very specific environment.
The other thing that's so great about it when you were talking about that is, I mean, if we just look at like popular media, like procedurals have been huge forever because people want to learn about like the private life of the doctors when they're not, everything except the medical emergency. I mean, they sprinkle those things in because all those shows are set in a hospital, but really it's about all the relationships and everything, or, police or whatever. So it's set in those worlds, and people love learning about characters through some bizarre job that they don't know about. Yeah. And again, there's this other layer of like, everyone, I think, pictures themselves like, oh, I wish I could be in the movies, or I wish I could be on TV. So it just sounds like there's so many layers here to pull people in. And of course, as you know, because you mentioned like hurry up and wait, it's like, I heard it described once as like a set or a production is like summer camp for adults. Like, you get on set, you're there for like a week, you feel like you're best friends for life, you don't talk to each other for 5 years, you show up on another set, you're like, oh my God, you're like my best friend, it's like yesterday that we just saw each other, and you have these really intense bonds, especially when there's a lot of downtime, you have nothing to do but just like, tell me your life story. So of course it's going to lend itself for better. I've seen both the better and the worst of this. For people to have these deep connections, and like you said, especially with any role where you have multiple people with the same director position. I mean, there's a film director and the camera director, the director of photography, for people that don't know, but they're still both called director, and so lead to a lot of this headbutt. So I can only imagine the twists and turns that come out of that. But
And the hierarchy too is, you know, when a director comes onto a TV show, they're coming on just to direct 1 or 2 episodes, whereas the director of photography is there for the entire series because they're setting the tone of the visual look of the show. And so a director, even though they're quote unquote in charge, and really the person who's in charge is the showrunner, right? The director comes on as in charge of that episode. But the director of photography is in charge of making the look cohesive. So if a director doesn't like what the director of photography is doing, or vice versa, it makes a very complicated relationship. And so that's what was kind of fun to explore in this book.
And we've been talking about this around this for a little bit, but tell me, like, what is the story? You know, it's called Love, Camera, Action. So like you mentioned, it's like kind of a romance novel. It's set on a TV production, but tell us a little bit, like what's the kind of picture, the back of book description for
Okay.
people?
Well, okay. So what it's set in this TV show called The Demon. The director of the day has been fired because he said some very unfortunate things about the Me Too movement. And so the producers have to fire him and bring in a woman really quick for PR. And they find this woman who's Canadian, and they bring her in last minute because she's a woman, she's available, and she's really good at directing sex scenes. So she's been working kind of in the bush leagues for a long time on, like, you know, cult indie movies and small budget TV shows. And this is her big break. Like, this is a huge show that she's being brought in on. And she walks on set the first day. She has no time to prep. There's no like pre-production that she can do. She has to walk in the day they're shooting. And when she walks on set, she smacks right into the director of photography, who mistakes her for not the director because there's not as many women directors as there are male directors. And he thinks that she's lost. And while he's giving her directions, she's like, oh my God, I love this guy. This guy is one of my idols. He's such an amazing director of photography. He's considered a genius. He's considered a tyrant. Like, he's an A-lister, and she's so excited to work with him. And when he finally realizes that she's the director, he's like, oh God, a newbie who has all these ideas, and I don't want ideas. I just want to get through my day. And he's become kind of very like lackluster in his job. So it's sort of like a grumpy sunshine thing that turns into enemies to lovers because she has all these ideas and she's very excited to make her mark. He does not want her to make her mark because he wants the show to look like he wants it to look. And so they're always battling for control. And so then that's sort of the background of their relationship. They keep shooting the show. There's like an evil showrunner who comes in, has all sorts of ideas, and basically hijinks ensues.
Encapsulation at the end, and hijinks ensue.
Yeah, I know. It's my favorite. It says so much.
Fortunately or unfortunately, again, like I can picture all of that, you know, because there's so much politics. And I wanted you to just explain for people a little bit. You talked a little bit about, because film and TV are totally different. Like, you know, the whether you're an auteur director or not, it's very much like the director's vision for the movie. Like, that's it. But like you had mentioned, the show has a style. And the crew is usually there the whole time. The showrunner's there the whole time. But maybe the writer's room, you know, they rotate who gets credit on each thing, but they're there the whole time. But the directors aren't. And they are coming in cold. They are coming in. So describe that hierarchy a little bit so people understand really the difference, because unfortunately it probably is very common for people to get swapped out last minute and walk into that very position.
Yeah. It's, you know, they say that film is a director's medium and TV is a producer's medium and theater is a writer's medium. And the difference between TV and film is that directors often will get a script, have a vision for it. They'll hire a director of photography that they like. Pardon me. And they'll build the creative team around their vision. But in TV, it's the showrunner who is looking after the writer's room, who's looking after the casting, who's looking after the DP and the directors, and they kind of decide the style of the show. And the showrunner is like the executive producer. They decide, with that group, they decide the look of the show. And the directors kind of just come in for hire. Like they just sort of come in like you might have on the pilot, you might have a director who comes in to help solidify the look, but it's from a financial perspective, you can't have a director go all the way through because it would slow the shooting down. So you need to bring directors in, and they kind of have to slot in. They have to look at the scripts, know who they're working with, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, but they have to fit themselves into the mold that's already been set. So they can make their mark, but they can't make too much of their mark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think people, to parallel this a little bit, it's like when any band does the one-off like outside genre album or something, that people kind of expect, or the Marvel movies or whatever, like they're kind of like, I'm here for this, and you could go to the edges, but you don't go past that, because then it's not what I want. Star Wars, any franchise that's been around for a long, long time, and it very much shows that. And every artist wants to be like, oh, we've been doing this for 40 years, we want to do something different, and it's like, oh no,
no, you can't.
This is your lane, for better or worse, until you retire. So that might be a way for people to understand like what it's like. And I'm sure people have seen shows, especially if there's a show that feels uneven. That might be sometimes where those edges are pushed, where someone really wants to go, I really want to lean into this way, and you go, but the show, it's here over, not here over. So,
you see that sometimes in TV shows from series to series. So for example, a good example is Community. Dan Harmon was in Community for the first 3 seasons, and then he, I think, was fired. He was fired for the 4th, and they brought in a different showrunner, and it just tanked because the tone was completely different and nobody liked it. It had already become kind of a cult hit. So then they hired Dan Harmon back for the next 2 seasons until it was eventually canceled. So you can kind of see it in that when they changed the auteur, because Dan Harmon really is kind of an auteur in comedy. And when you change that, how drastically it can affect a show. So yeah, you can see it in that example.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about because I mentioned parallels there a minute ago. The parallels or differences, because you were talking about like producing things, like all these, it doesn't matter if it's an album or a book or a show or a film or whatever, it's like you're producing work. So how was it same or different to go through, like, I have a show and I have to pitch and I have to do the thing, like, and I have a book and I have to write an outline and I have to get a thing and I have to get a publication. So how was that producing for you, similar or different from TV and film work to your debut novel? It's kind of like learning how to do your first show all over again.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, first of all, writing takes a lot. It's just a lot slower. It takes longer to write the book. It takes longer to get feedback. It takes longer for people to read things. You just have to be a lot more patient. You don't have as many voices in the tone of it. People still do really appreciate authors, so they want the author to maintain their voice. And of course, you also want editors to help you and to fix it and to work on it. It's not like you're doing it all on your own, but it's just not as intense. So there's one scene in the book, for example, where the showrunner comes in and they're just about to shoot a scene and it's set in hell. And he comes in and he says, wouldn't it be great if we actually made hell blue? And they had completely made the entire scene red because that's generally what we think of as hell. But the showrunner came in and wants it all to be blue. And they have to switch like that, even though they don't think it makes any sense. The showrunner said it and they have to do it. And in TV and film, that happens on in small and large ways every day. like every day, those kinds of things. But you're not taking as big swings in books. You know, you're changing things subtly. You wouldn't come in and completely change a storyline or a plot. You change plot points, but not a complete storyline, because it would just destroy the book itself. So it's like people either like it or they don't. So I think there's fewer voices. It takes longer, but how it's similar is that you still have to convince people that it's worth something. You still have to talk people into bringing you on as an agent, publishing it, and then when it comes out, buying it, paying attention to it, you know, going on to podcasts like this. You still have to go through all the marketing. So the idea of, you know, a writer in their room just furiously writing away and that's all they do is kind of a unicorn now. Like, you have to be able to do all the things in order for a book to get out there. And I was traditionally published. So there's lots of things that I didn't have to do because it was traditionally published. The indie authors, oh my God, they're doing everything, including formatting. They're doing the book cover. They're doing all of the launch stuff. So I have mad respect for indie authors because that's a lot of work. But yeah, like I think any kind of creative endeavor, you have to be a producer as well, or just like it won't cut through the noise.
To parallel that a little bit, and people that listen to the show will know I've talked about this in previous episodes, but we have a couple films that have been distributed. And so the first film I made, I was in Australia, so the Australian producers like handled that. So it was just like, 5 years later, they're like, "Hey, our film's picked up." I was like, "Great." I don't know how that happened. I didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah. But we had our, which I call our first, my wife and I made our first film, got distribution a year or two ago. And so we learned this new term to us at the time, which was post. So it's like, okay, the movie's done, it's out. Here's all, to piggyback on what you said, the marketing and the ongoing push to let people know, watch it. Here's where it is. Oh, it's on a new place. Now we have to advertise that too. It's this continuous marketing of raising awareness and talking about it and promoting it. And it's like, the movie came out 5 years ago, but it's still growing as a life. Like, it's going to live on forever. And you're never going to be done. So you have to like learn how to do all that. And until you've gone in there, you don't know how. But I'm glad you had, because this is also, again, a parallel where, indie filmmakers now, they have all these things available to like YouTube or Vimeo or whatever to put stuff on. But like you said about the authors, like, they have to do everything themselves. Yeah. We luckily have a distributor who's like, they're putting us on the platforms and they're doing the things and they're just telling us, here's how you can help us help you. But talk to me a little bit about like, how did you, and maybe this is another parallel of like pitching a show and then getting it to network so it gets approved, so you have a pilot and then or whatever. But how did you go from like, hey, I wrote the book, to hey, I got published? What is that like? That
was a really long road. I got the manuscript into something called Pitch Wars, which was a mentorship program that was very, very well regarded in the publishing world. And I got in on the last year. They stopped it after my year. But what that entailed is that I got a mentor and an editor, and they gave you a showcase for agents to see you. And I didn't get an agent from that, but because I could put Pitch Wars mentee on that gave me a certain amount of street cred where agents would look at it, because it was a very rigorous process, not only to get into it, but to stay to get all of the editorial information. So I think I queried probably 45-ish agents before someone picked me up. And they say that you have to have a manuscript done. Like, that's the thing about writing a book, is that you have to have it done before you can even try to get it out there. So you have to make the book as good as possible before you get it out. So then you can't query agents until the book is done. They say that you shouldn't stop querying agents until about 70 or 80 agents. And that's when you should say, okay, maybe my book either needs more work or it needs to be put away because maybe it's just not the time for it. So then I got an agent. He submitted me for a year. It took a year to submit. And in that year, he actually decided he didn't want to be an agent anymore. And so I went and got another agent, which he introduced me to. And that's the thing about working in TV and film, which was really funny, is like all the authors that I knew were like, oh my God, are you devastated that you lost your agent? And I was like, so jaded by that point. I'm like, oh my God, no, like agents come and go. There's always an agent somewhere. And so I got my second agent, but then the book sold. And it took another year and a half after that for the book to be published. So it's a long process. It's a long process. Now, I was writing another book at the same time that all this was happening. So I couldn't work on that book while it was kind of going through the rounds. I instead I began another book and started packaging that because I wanted to have something to follow up with this book. So yeah, it's a long process getting it out there for sure.
Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here. And to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at ShaneBorza.com. As both a master level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my film notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show. I was going to ask, what else have you done? Where are you going? Are there, I mean, in the industry, it's always like, what's your next project? That type of thing. But let me piggyback on that. I mentioned our film. So we have the distinction, which we didn't realize this until afterwards. So my wife and I got married on a ledge on El Capitan in Yosemite. And so we had the world's first wedding on El Cap, which we didn't realize. And so we made a short, like a 30-minute movie. We were jokingly saying, well, we're eloping with friends because it's literally so big you can't fit a lot of who's going to go to Yosemite with us or whatever. So we're like, we'll make the most awesome wedding movie ever and we'll submit it to film festivals because it's an adventure documentary movie.
Cool.
I got pressured is the word that popped in my head, which is actually very true. Encouraged by my film mentor to be like, hey, stop making shorts. You've been doing this for 10 years. You need to make features. And so 5 years after we got married, we went back and was like, there's all this thread of story that we never finished. So we redid it as a feature. And then anyway, so now it's 10 years later and the movie's out on all these platforms, whatever. So it takes forever. And a lot of these things can be discouraging for people, but and whether it's the book version or the film version, I always encourage people. And I got this from a producer in Sydney, which was so helpful. And he said, you can pitch a project, but you can sell a product. But you can't have a product until you complete something. And so many people, it's so arduous to complete a script or a book or whatever. But when you were talking about that, the parallel is if you sell a script or you're going to film it or whatever, you're going to keep rewriting it, but you can't do a rewrite until it's done.
Yeah.
You can't pitch it until it's done. You have to keep just going until it's finished. But then you have to realize okay, the first part is finishing it. The second part is getting it out there. Then the third part is selling. You're never going to be done with these projects. But you can at least shift from pre to production to post to whatever. And each one of those is a step forward. So I always want people to feel yes, it's so earth-shatteringly difficult sometimes, but just keep going because at some point, if nothing else, you can say it's done. You can watch it on YouTube or wherever. maybe this stuff doesn't get picked up, but it enables people, like you mentioned, like, hey, I went through this mentorship program. You had to do a lot of work just to get in that, but because of that, then the next thing happened.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I think a lot of people have this notion that things happen very quickly and that they blow up and you can have your movie made or your book written and it's just done. But it takes a lot of work and one step in front of another. Like this is, being on this podcast is one step that I'm taking to get my book out there, like talking to you about it. And also just talking about art in general, that will feed back into me and inspire me for my next book. And so every little thing that you do is feeding back into the project that you're working on. But you're right, it never stops because you have to keep promoting it and you have to be working on the next project. And then when the next project is halfway done, you have to be starting the third project. So you have to kind of be doing this in a constant cycle as you go, just so that you can, have something in the works. Because sometimes, like, I've had huge successes and devastating failures. And you can't really control that. And so it's best just to have a lot of different things going on so that it doesn't, the devastating failures don't drag you down so hard.
Well, let's go back because you mentioned while that process was going on, you were writing another book. So how are you finding yourself now between I'm an author who, it sounds like you have written several books, and also you have this production, TV and filmmaking background. Are you pursuing both? Have you kind of switched over to I'm an author and that's what I'm doing? How are you balancing all that? Because I believe you also have a family and it's so hard to juggle all these things.
Yeah.
But so are you finding it, because especially, some people, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, if you're a showrunner or you're a director, you finish your film, you finish your season, and you're probably at a level where you can just kind of take a break and then start developing the next season. But if you're on the crew, to go back to the character's story, you're going set to set to set. It's kind of an endless, just where am I today? What am I shooting today type of thing. And same with books. It's such a thing to finish a book that you probably need quite a bit of time to even come up with what's the next book going to be about, or even the choice to be do I even want to write another book? So now that you've written several, where are you at with all of these things? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is really tough to balance. I'm a single mom. I still work in TV. I'm more of the person that goes from set to set to set. I don't work on set as much, but I'm going from gig to gig to gig to gig. There's not too many breaks in between. And so you have to find the time to do these other projects because, I do a lot of projects for hire. And that's great because I'm making money and, I'm getting stuff on there, but it's not always stuff that I necessarily want to be working on. I'm happy to be working, but for my own voice and the stuff that I want to work on right now is novels. So I have to be balancing both because as great as books aren't going to pay the bills. They'll pay some of the bills. They won't pay all of the bills. And so you kind of have to balance both. You have to balance your day job, and my day job just happens to be in TV. So for me, it's just finding the time, making sure I consistently find time. I'm never going to be able to be oh, I've got 2 weeks off. I'm gonna hunker down and do this. I might have 2 weeks off, but I'll be so exhausted from work that I won't be able to see my way out of a paper bag. So you have to find consistent time. So I've when my first book was being on submission, I started writing the second book, which I finished. And now people are looking at it and they're giving me notes. And while that is happening, I'm marketing this book and I started the third book. So I've started an outline and a proposal for a third book. And it's just all those are kind of working together at different speeds, I guess you would say. I mean, like, you just kind of have to do it. Like, you just have to keep going. You know, like, you're a filmmaker. There's always something going on at various stages, right? Is that true for you?
Yeah, very much. And to parallel that, it's like well, like I mentioned earlier. So it's like, oh, what's your next project? You're at a film festival playing the film,
Yeah.
and they're like, what's next?
Yeah.
And you're like, what's next is I'm playing this again at the next festival. Like, this is what but it very much is like you're writing something, you're in the process of that. Maybe you're developing another idea. You're not even at the writing process, and maybe you're in the middle of shooting something, or you're in post, you're editing something, you're just putting something out. Like, all those things are happening simultaneously. And again, paralleling, I'm sure, like, I don't do music, but I'm sure it's like, well, the band that's on tour, they're touring the album that they already released, but while they're on the road, they're writing songs for the next album. Like, they're doing all that simultaneously. The one thing, I was just looking this up because I always forget the guy's name. So there's he's Japanese director Takashi Miike, who is Japanese. So he's known, especially around the early 2000s, like Audition was a big movie, and Ichi the Killer, and a bunch of those. So he's famous for, I think he writes in the morning, and then he'll go to set and direct whatever he's shooting, and then he edits at night. So he's working on 3 projects simultaneously. And he said the reason he does that is because he's never stuck. So if he's writing, he's like, I don't know what to do. By the time he goes into project 2 and then 3, and he comes back to project 1, he's like seen every possible way to fix problems, or he's switched. He's not stuck on this. He's looking at this, and then he comes back to this with fresh eyes. He's like, oh, now I have a great idea.
Right.
And that sounds crazy to most people,
It sounds crazy to me. That's an intense amount of focus.
Yeah, that's why, he has 120 directing credits, because he just is constantly just putting out stuff. And it's just like you were talking about. It's, I am balancing and spinning and in the middle of 3 different parts of the process all the time.
Now, that being said, I don't want to scare anybody off. You don't have to be like that. Like, you can just be working on one thing consistently and then just move on to the next thing. Like, you don't, the key is to be doing something. The key is to be creating something. You don't have to get on the hamster wheel for every single thing if it's not able to. Like, I don't want it to scare anybody off in that way. Like, it's just important to be creating, no matter how you do it.
And life happens all the time. So what you were talking about earlier is going around and just living your life. You're filling your stuff up with all this like inspiration, and especially as a so I have a writing degree, and so my professor used to call it the writer's ear. So you're just like, ooh, I was walking past someone in the supermarket and I heard, or specifically, usually misheard somebody say something. It was like, that's amazing. And you have to write it down so you can remember and like use it as fodder in something. And that's how we are kind of like subconsciously in the back of our head developing stuff all the time. But to your point, like, most people are not in the A-level, whatever, painter, musician, whatever. They're doing it because it's like the side hustle that they love. It's the passion. It's the, when I have time, when I have capacity, I'm going to do the next fill in the blank.
Yeah.
It just happens to be some people, their day job is in the thing that they also do. But regardless, like you said, it's like, I got to figure out a way to, like, I got to feed these kids, and then when I have some time, I do the next evolution of whatever the project is. But the parallel again is like, you work at a bank, you work at a store, and you're taking in all this inspiration to fuel, when you have time, you work on the thing.
And I think the key is if you say work at a bank or work at a store, is that you don't let the time that you do have fritter away. You make it a priority to work on your side hustle, because there's tons and tons of people who say, oh gosh, I really wish I could write a book, or I really wish I could make a movie, or wish I could like write a song, and they never do it. And the only way to get something done, unfortunately, is to actually do it. Like, you have to sit down and do it. And so it's the consistency. It's like, I'm going to go every Wednesday Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for half an hour, I'm going to work on it. And nobody, like the kids aren't allowed to come in and bug me, or my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my husband or my wife, they're not allowed to bug me during that half an hour. I'm going to work on it. And you have to put that first, like you have to make that a priority or it just won't get done.
And it's counterintuitive sometimes, but the less time you have, the more valuable it is. I mean, if you have nothing to do except like 12 hours a day of writing, like sometimes you're never going to do anything because you're like, I have all the time in the world. But if you're like, I only have 2 hours a week, like you're going to sit down and be like, I'm going to get 10 hours out of these 2 hours. So it can be really helpful and really inspirational to be like, I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm kind of like building up all this pressure and then just like exploding it into the 30 minutes that I have. I did want to ask you before we get into like the name of the show, the film notes, like what might be your notes, but because this can be kind of a controversial topic about like the like writer's block. You know, some people say like it doesn't exist. Like you just have to like there's the discipline. You know, like start writing. I've heard several workshops where people are like, even if you're writing like I have nothing to write, I'm terrible, nothing to write is like at some point after 2 pages of that, you're eventually going to just start writing. And other people are like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to distract yourself, you have to come back, you have to. So like, how do you deal with that? Because again, you're juggling a lot of things. Time is precious.
Yeah.
What would you say is like your way of dealing with that, if it happens at all, or maybe some ideas for people? Maybe this could be a segue into like your notes.
My notes. Okay, it's one of the jobs that I worked on was I worked on ghost shows. And I worked on a couple of different versions of ghost shows, like Ghost Hunters, but also those reenactment shows where people recount their hauntings and they're an interview and there's a recreation by non-union actors and like spooky lighting and like all this kind of stuff. So I wrote those recreations and the deadlines that I had were insane. I'd have to write a half-hour show in 3 days, just going from the interviews. And I'd have to organize the interviews into a storyline, have it make sense, like write something that the actors would understand with no dialogue. It would have to be all silent. And what that taught me was make a decision. You don't have time to waffle. You don't have time to figure out what your motivation is. The motivation is they're scared. There's a ghost in their house. Done. And what that taught me in terms of writer's block is when you're just sitting there and you're not doing anything or you're not getting an idea across, just make a decision. Make a decision. It can be wrong. It can be completely wrong. You can come back and change it later. Any decision that you make will lead to something. It will lead to some kind of inspiration. Even if you sit there and go, okay, they're in this ice cream parlor. I don't know what they say. Well, maybe an alien comes in the door. What are they going to say then? And then you can have them talk. And then you're like, okay, well, I don't really have aliens in my story. But what out of that dialogue came out that makes sense to who these characters are that will lead to the next scene or jump to a different scene. I'm not a big fan of jumping to other scenes. I have to write in order, but lots of people jump to different scenes or work on dialogue on a scene back, like just work on something. Because the thing I see people do a lot in terms of writer's block is they'll get to a certain point where they stop and then they'll just go back. And they'll refine like that first act or like the first 3 chapters over and over and over again. And then but they never get past the block. And so just making a decision will launch you into something. And you shouldn't be afraid. I think a lot of writers in particular are afraid of making a wrong move, like of it being lame or cliche or, stupid. And that's kind of what writer's block comes out of. Like there's a great book by Stephen Pressfield. Do you know this book, The War of Art? And it's all about what stops you from creating. And it's a very small book. And there's just like short little passages of what kind of gets in the way, the various things that get in your way from creating. And I highly recommend any artist look at that, because even if you just read one page, you're like, oh my God, I do that. Like procrastination, or, thinking that you have all the time in the world, or, whatever it is. So for me, it's make a decision.
Great note there. I want to piggyback on that. So I went to a writer's workshop once, and so people that don't know, so my quote day job, I'm a mental health coach. So I've
Oh, wow.
like a practice, and I found there's a lot of parallels between like helping people deal with like mental health issues and like developing and getting through like production difficulties. And one of them that works especially well, they use different words in the writer's workshop, but it's basically like you were talking about, like, don't keep going to here and stopping and going back. At the old school, people would use like index cards and like, okay, we have 50 scenes in the movie, and scene 1 is this, and scene 2 is this, and you can move them around if you want, but at least you had some kind of, or even an outline. And you're like, okay, so I get to here, I don't know what to do. And you go like, all right, well, what if? What if you wrote that scene? What's the next scene? This is kind of what you were talking about. You go, oh, well, the next scene is great.
Yeah.
What if you already had that page or 2 or 3?
Yeah. And
now we're on page 72. You're not stuck on 67 anymore. We're just gonna like fast forward to, and you can write all that. Now, if you have all this and you have all this, now all that's missing is this little piece in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's just getting past the sticking point. This is just like in the gym, you have the person helping you. It's like you can press it, and then you kind of get stuck, and then they give you a little boost, and then you can press, and it's just this little bit in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's what the spotter's for, to kind of help you. So it's really noticing, like, and a lot of us fall into these patterns. And so we have to be able to see them somehow and say like, oh, this is that thing that I do. I don't want to keep doing the thing I've done before, because now I have like a final draft of the first third, and I have nothing of the second and third.
Yeah.
So how do to go back? How do you finish it? Because you have to finish it before you can show it to anyone. So I really echo that. Before we get too late here, what might be some other notes that you have, either as an author or like someone who works in production, like wisdom and experience that you've accrued thus far, either things maybe that might be valuable to pass on for other people, or maybe things like you wished you had known earlier? Like all those can be really good notes for people.
One thing is just finish it. Whatever you're working on, just finish it. You can always go back and fix it. You can always go back and edit it. So many people have unfinished projects, and you can't make something better until it's done. So many of my first drafts are horrible. I would never let anyone look at them ever, not even good friends. It'd be too embarrassing, but I have to go through that in order to get to the next set of drafts that are better. And then I think the other thing I would say is that ask for help. Ask for help from people that you really respect. Don't necessarily ask your friends and family, because they'll either give you some devastating criticism because they don't know any better, or B, they'll just blow sunshine up your butt and you won't get any understanding of how to change it. Ask for help from people that you respect and take the note. Take the note. This is another thing that I find that a lot of artists don't do, and was really hammered into me in TV, is when I first started, when I got notes back on the things that I was working on, I was devastated. I was like, how dare you give me this note? This was perfect. How could you? And of course, it's not perfect. It's not perfect at all. I had to learn how to take the note. And sometimes the notes don't make any sense, or sometimes the notes you don't agree with, but you have to hear what the people are trying to tell you about the project so that you can address what's wrong with it. And that is very valuable. Like being malleable, understanding that these people just want to make it better. They will make it better. Collaboration tends to make things better. Like there's the rare time when it doesn't make it better, but I do think it's rare. And that's not to say you have to take every note. You don't have to. You can dig your heels in and say, no, this is how it's going. I recently finished something where I got notes from my editor and they really did not like a plot point that I put in. And I was like, no, that needs to be there. But what is she saying about that? She's saying that the plot point hasn't been earned. It doesn't make sense to the reader yet. So then I have to go back and make that plot point work. If I want it to stay, it needs to work. So ask for help, listen to notes, and take them.
Really good note, especially on taking the notes, because again, the good bad thing about making art is it's an art and a science. Like, you have to learn how to do these things, but you also have to be creative, and it's really hard to get criticism. And for better or worse, it can, people fall in the fight, flight, or freeze around this stuff. And I was just looking this up because I couldn't remember. So the film school I went to, the director of the school used to be like script doctor person. He worked with Jane Campion a lot, and he said one of the great things that he learned from her is every time she did a screening with anybody, she would show up with a notebook and a pen and say, "What did you all think?" And then she would like sit there like this, ready to literally write down people's notes. And he goes, she never said anything other than things that encourage them to keep talking. And he goes, because she wanted them to feel heard, but it also meant I don't have to respond or think about any of this right now. I can do that later. I can process this and yell and be like, they're idiots or whatever later. Like, I'm just here to like write down the things they're saying. And then I have the space and the time to digest this stuff later and go, well, I really wish I hadn't called that person out, because actually now that I've calmed down, this is a great idea or whatever. Because but the other thing is, because they all felt heard, it didn't matter if she took their note or not. When they did the next screening, they were usually happy.
Oh, that's interesting.
But if she sat there and argued with them, like it just makes them sit in the note that much harder. And they're going to be watching for her to not have done what they said. And they're going to insist on it. But most people, to your point, like, they just need to be heard. And it's really smart what you said about like, what's not really what they're saying. It's what they're implying. Like, oh, what I really need to take away from this is not that that's the wrong plot point, but it's not earned. I have to do more work.
Like, what's the note behind the note? Is always what they say. What's the note behind the note? And it's a hard skill to learn. And I have to say, I'm still learning it. I still get notes back and think, oh God, I hate this. I hate hearing this. But it does, like, I love that Jane Campion story, because the idea of just writing them down and then going away and processing them is so important to hear what's going on. And, sometimes they're really good. Like, maybe people feel really uncomfortable about a certain thing, and you meant them to feel really uncomfortable. And so you're like, aces, like, that is working. That I will not change, because I want that to be like that. It's a hard lesson to learn. And people do get very defensive about their work. And then they can't learn and they can't listen when you become defensive.
One last story. This is a different context, but the lore is in the last Avengers movie where Tony Stark is like, he's like, I am Iron Man, and he snaps his fingers and he like saves the universe. That was done in post by the editor in the editing bay. Where Thanos says, I'm inevitable, and he snaps his finger and it doesn't work because they switched the glove. And he goes, well, and then we're cutting to Robert Downey Jr. And he has the glove, and he's like, and he should be like, and I'm Iron Man. And they were like, yes. And so they shot that and they put it in the movie. And now it's this like iconic scene, because it's the end of this 10 years of Robert Downey Jr. playing this character. And so these notes can come from anywhere. And again, we just have to say, which is what I was taught, which is the best idea wins.
Mhm.
Who it comes from, we have to allow ourselves to, on one hand, be like, no, 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 my
Mhm.
idea is the best,
Yeah.
or anyone's idea is the best. I know who's the best. We're going with that.
Yeah.
But we also have to say, your idea is not the best. We're not going with
Mhm.
it. Like,
Mhm.
and some people fall into that imposter syndrome where they go, oh, well, you have a certain title or whatever, so you must be right. I must be wrong.
Mhm.
And that too is something that's really hard for people to learn, because sometimes you're like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a thing about learning to listen to your own instincts too. Like that's just to go back to the book, the difference between the director and the director of photography. The director of photography in my book is very anal. Like he really likes to know exactly what's happening all the time. And she comes in and she has done her homework, but she really likes to be open to inspiration. And that kind of messes with his game. And I think you have to still be open to inspiration, and you just don't know where it's going to come from sometimes. And that is like, again, back to the Jane Campion example, is that she's actively listening to what those people say, because she knows that maybe someone will say something and it might trigger something in her mind and her inspirational, backlog of what's going to make things better. You have to be open to that sort of stuff. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be prepared, because sometimes inspiration doesn't come, and if you're not prepared, then you're screwed. But you have to be flexible enough to be inspired and to listen for where that inspiration comes from.
Well, I'm so glad we talked that out, because again, I think it's really important for people to hear these things from people
Mhm.
so that they can help learn that things are possible, or how to do these things so they can like move their projects forward.
Mhm.
So we talked about a lot of things. Wanted to make sure we have a chance to have you spotlight stuff. So like, where, especially the book, like where can
Mhm.
people find you, follow you, see the book, see your work, all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. Where would be some good places?
Well, you can follow me. I've got my website is noelstark.com, and it's Noel. And then on IG and TikTok, I'm Noel Stark author. And my book, it's everywhere you buy books. It's in soft cover and hardcover. It's on ebook. It's on audiobook. It's in all the places. It's on Amazon. It's on at Barnes and Noble. It's at your local bookshop. So it's all out there, and it's called Love Camera Action. And yeah, it's my debut.
So just wanted to thank you again for being here, and to remind people, if you're listening to the podcast, I always encourage you, this is a YouTube show. I love to have people, predominantly we're talking about making film or things to watch. So go watch the show. You get to see the speaker. When they talk about like the book, for instance, you see the book cover. When you talk about the movie, you see the poster, you see the screen grab of the website, you can
Mhm.
see the link. So please go and watch the show. Of course, podcasts are easy. So listen to the audio version wherever you get podcasts, but this is a
Mhm.
monthly show, and you get to meet new awesome people like Noel who are doing awesome things. So please subscribe and tune in. But Noel, just wanted to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go read your book. It sounds really awesome.
Cool.
And thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. You really made me think about the process and the artistic way, and it's really fun to talk about.
Yeah, of course. And for everyone here today watching, thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene one, Apple, take one.